Tears of Fate, Chapter 1, Welcome to Life. Taiwo and Kahind were identical twins whose father disappeared at the point of their delivery, leaving their mother alone at the hospital. Sani, who was a soldier, abandoned Mary, his mistress, because he could not see himself living under the same roof with only women. Mary could recall how he constantly threatened her over the sex of her baby, whilst she was still pregnant. "I just hope you know what you're doing. I have lived with you for several years without a child. And now that you have decided to become pregnant, I hope you know it must be a male child, otherwise, I will abandon you at the hospital. I can't afford to be ridiculed by my friends for not making a male child. Better be careful," Sani warned, and each time he said that, Mary laughed, but deep in her mind, she knew that her man did not know how to issue an empty threat. He said only what he meant, and for that, a part of her continued to pray for a baby boy, but unfortunately, she did not only give birth to one, but two girls at once. Before her delivery, Sani had wanted to travel out of the state, and the reasons he gave were so flimsy and could only point to the fact that he just wanted to get away earlier, so that he could easily stay back if Mary gave birth to a baby girl, or as well return if and only if she gave birth to a male child. However, towards her last trimester, the doctor advised that Sani stayed around, just in case Mary required urgent attention, as it was not certain if she could put to bed by herself. When Mary returned with the news, Sani's heart was troubled, because he knew the consequence of disregarding such an instruction, especially if Mary died out of his own carelessness. The military would give him an unforgettable punishment, or he might even be dismissed from the service. For this purpose, he decided to stay behind, but made his decision clear to Mary that their continuous stay as a couple would only be determined by the sex of her first child. To him, there was no point bothering himself so much about Mary, because he hadn't even paid her bride price, neither had he set his eyes on any member of her family. Mary fell in love with him when he was posted to her hometown in Igbatako, Ondo State. Despite all her parents' warnings, when they first noticed how Mary took food out of their house and returned with empty plates, she still persisted, and before she could realize what was happening, she was already deeply in love with Sani, and house a military man. However, from every indication, Sani was not yet ready to settle down, and even if he wished to, his people may never allow him to marry a Yoruba Christian lady. As Sani was again transferred to Lagos, Mary sheepishly followed him, and since then, they had been living together, from one barak to another. People often referred to her as Ayawo Sani, meaning Sani's wife. But between the two of them, they knew the bitter truth. Mary's parents had worried their lives out, but to no avail, as Mary did not seem to listen to anyone that told her not to live with the love of her life. It was for that reason that she completely refused to pick up their calls, and after several attempts to reach her, the old parents made up their minds not to worry her any longer. After all, they had other successful children. Although Mary was their first daughter, she had two elder brothers who were professionals in their fields of endeavor, and her two younger sisters were still in the university, while Mary had already abandoned her studies midway to follow Sani. She had been a law student at the University of Ado-Ekiti, and was already in 300 level when the wind of love, or perhaps lust, blew her away. When it was time for her delivery, Sani took Mary to the hospital by himself, but shortly after she had the twins, Sani was nowhere to be found. The nurses looked for him everywhere to inform him that his wife had put to bed, but they did not know that he had already gotten the message from one of the male doctors, who came out immediately the twins were delivered. Reporting the news to Mary was not an easy task for the nurses, but she already had the sign coming a long time ago, as she remembered all his threats, and now that she had given birth to two girls, it was expected that Sani could run away, so she told the nurses not to bother, as she already knew his whereabouts. As a military hospital, Mary was asked to go without payment, but when she returned to their quarters, she discovered that Sani truly meant his threats. All his belongings were cleared to the pillow, and with this, Mary became shocked. Wait a minute, was it up to this extent? Of course I know that he had wanted to run away, But is it to this level that nothing of his is left in this house? Only few things that might not even be of any use to me. She wondered. Gradually, friends and neighbors started coming in to greet the babies, and Mary continued to lie to them that her husband had left to get some things for the newly born babies, and that was just to protect him. As military personnel, their neighbors' lifestyle could be likened to that of cultists, and any information not handled wisely could lead to a great disaster. So Mary was not interested in indicting Sonny. Despite what he had done, several days had gone by and there had not been any trace of him. Mary had continued to take care of her babies all by herself, using the little money she saved and, of course, the ones that people gave to the babies when they visited. All effort to reach Sonny had proved abortive, as his phone lines were completely switched off. One of his cousins whom he once introduced to Mary had equally visited, as Mary called to inform him of her delivery, but upon his visit, he did not mention anything as to Sonny's whereabouts, and Mary avoided the topic altogether. Just to protect her man, she had completely alienated herself from her family and therefore did not bother to inform them about her new status. They saw her as a total failure. But she still could not understand why she acted the way she did. She had been a promising lawyer in the making. Before she abandoned her studies to follow Sonny, she found it difficult to believe that she had become a housewife, with little or no hope for the future. 1 week after delivery, as was the custom, the children ought to have been given names by their parents, but Mary was rather preoccupied with thoughts of how to locate her husband. There was no name in her subconscious, and even if there was, it must have been that of a male child, since that was all she had hoped for. But unfortunately for her, when the day arrived, people turned up in anticipation, even though there had been no formal invitation. Looking at the crowd, she only wished that Sonny was around to give her daughters befitting names in Hausa, and when it was time, she managed to remember the common names for twins in Yoruba land, which were Taiwo and Kahind. However, one of the guests also added Glory and Gloria to them, which Mary barely remembered. As people looked at the babies, they could not help but wondered how they looked so much alike. Even Mary herself trembled when she first saw them at the hospital, until the doctors explained to her that the girls were formed by one egg, instead of two, as in most twins. They looked so identical.